Now please welcome to the set Terry Mattingly. Terry, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much, because Terry is single-handedly the first person that helped us get our daughter Michelle in the very beginning. So I'm very blessed to have you here today. Tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, I'm a licensed school psychologist in private practice, so I don't work in the school system, although I used to. I've been in private practice about 10 years, and parents and families that are having concerns about their child, whether it's learning, attention, behavioral problems, the school maybe has brought it to their attention that there's issues, or the parents are seeing some issues at home, they bring them into me for an evaluation, and I do a comprehensive evaluation looking to see what could be affecting their functioning.
Okay, well, let's talk about that a little bit more, and I'm going to give you some personal examples using our children, because when Michelle first came to us, she was 3.5, almost 4, and she's definitely a lovely, spirited young lady, a lot like me, so it's just kind of funny, because I wonder how you diagnose me, but she came to me, and she was obviously a little hyper. She was always the child that was interrupting, even at 4 years old. She was always all over the place. She was always super excited, and you can tell there was focus. You know, I jokingly say, remember the show where it's like, oh, there's a squirrel, you know, like I'm over there. And she was just all over the place. So at 4, we recognized that there was a struggle, there was a challenge. And she came to you, and you absolutely helped us get her on the right path. And I'm proud to tell you that she had all A's and 1 B, and she's really working hard to get the B up. And the B was in advanced math, which I questioned, how is she in advanced math at first? Because she has always struggled, but she's learned with the help of you, with the help of medication, she's learned to overcome those struggles. Now, I want to talk a little bit, because Rachel, on the other hand, who is very different than Michelle, Rachel, on the other hand, I didn't see those signs. So what is the difference between ADHD and ADD, and what are some of the signs that people look for?
Okay. You'll hear those terms ADHD and ADD. It actually is all classified as ADHD. A lot of people refer to ADHD that doesn't have as much of the hyperactivity as ADD. But really, all of the disorders fall under the umbrella of ADHD, which stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And then there are different subtypes. So there's the combined type, which has kind of an equal amount of the hyperactivity and the impulsivity problems, which would be the interrupting, the activity level that you described with Michelle. You know, she was more of the combined type. The ones that are predominantly inattentive, you wouldn't see as much of the hyperactivity and the impulsivity. They're not as chatty, they're not interrupting people as much. They would be kids that would make careless mistakes on their schoolwork, rush through things, have difficulties with organization, have difficulties following multi-step directions. You know, you find yourself repeating yourself over and over again. It's more of a focus and attention issue. It's not as much of an activity level issue.
Okay. One of the reasons why I asked you to be on the show today is because I thought I've learned so much through this experience that I'm sure that there are other people out there that may need to learn this process too. And what's the difference? Like when you first told me that you were a school psychologist, I automatically thought, oh, she works for the school system, and that's not the case at all. So I wanted to educate people and make sure that you knew a little bit about, you know, when do you get help? But I would speculate that there are probably some parents that are out there, or wives that are out there that are questioning whether or not your husband has ADD or ADHD. I speculate, what do you tell them if they're thinking, well, if I let my child get tested, then they're going to be labeled, and that's going to ruin the rest of their lives? Well, how do you respond to that?
I do hear that a lot. A lot of families are concerned about labels and how it's going to affect the child, their self-esteem, how other people are going to see them, are the teachers going to treat them differently? Of course, as a parent, and I have 3 children of my own, you don't want to think there's anything quote-unquote wrong with your child. But really, it is a medical diagnosis, and there is a difference in the chemicals in the brain. So the frontal lobe of the brain, which is what handles planning and organization and that sort of thing, the chemicals that are needed are just not being produced enough. So the stimulant medication, which is the most common treatment for ADHD, works to stimulate that part of the brain. But over the years, the stigma that used to be attached to ADHD has really decreased. I think because more and more people are being diagnosed, and there's just, certainly you can go on the internet and learn about it. So there's just a lot more education about it. A lot of more people are informed and realize that it has nothing to do with intelligence. It has nothing to do with motivation. You know, some of the most brightest, most successful people in the world have ADHD. So in a lot of ways, it's a blessing. There are wonderful characteristics that go along that we hear about, the negative characteristics, the things that they can't do or the things that they struggle with. But you mentioned with with Michelle, that she was, had this bubbly, fun personality. We see that a lot, not with all, but with a lot of ADHD kids. So they do have a special spirit in them. And a lot of times, other children like to be around them because they're a lot of fun. So it's just become, I think, more widely accepted. And so I would just, tell parents that basically we're finding out all that we can about your child, their strengths, their weaknesses, and then how we can help them be the most successful they can be.
Okay, I think that's awesome, because I know that with Michelle, for example, because she was diagnosed at an early age, she was able to have all through from kindergarten on up, she was able to have special attention, special mediation, special testing capabilities that didn't make her feel isolated. I mean, even at the time they called it the SLD, Severe Learning Disabled Program. They have since wised up and changed that, because how can you not only negatively impact your child once that gets out, but they've changed that. But she was in those programs, but she knew that when she needed to ask for help, and she eventually figured out. Now she's in 6th grade now, but she eventually figured out, what, I'm owed this. This is what I need. This is something that's important to me. And when it's testing days, she goes out of her way, and that was something that was huge. I had a hard time with medication, and I thought, okay, well, do I just do watch your foods, watch your vegetables? Do I not do medication? And I've learned that when a child comes to you and says, Mom, can I please have that? I have a special test today. Then it's helping their thought process. It's helping what they do. Now, when do people come and hire you?
Usually at the beginning of, the best time is when the child's, I would say about 4 or 5 years old, if there are concerns. Early intervention is the most important. Most of my clients are probably more like 8 or 9 years old. And then I have some that are in high school that have never been diagnosed that I work with. But earlier the better, because otherwise, if they've been struggling for several years, they're internalizing that, they're feeling frustrated. A lot of times they don't like school, they feel poorly about themselves. And when I do the full battery of tests, one part of it is an IQ test. Some of them act shocked when if the child's old enough and the parents are okay with it, I'll sometimes share the results with them and say, look how smart you are. But for years, they've felt like they were, the dumbest kid in the class, for lack of a better word. And so obviously we want to avoid that, and we want them to, get the help that they need as early as possible.
So they can feel smart. They can feel worthy, because if you don't feel worthy, how are you going to be the best you can be? How are you going to achieve your success and your goals? Another thing that I've learned this past year that I thought it was important to share with you, just in case you may have a child that's experiencing the same thing. Last year at the beginning of the year, we started noticing some sporadic testing results with my daughter. And one of the things that I can tell you is some of the testing results that we have found was she would go to school and she would get an F. She got an F on a spelling test, and I was kind of shocked because we studied the night before and she got 100%, and she's a smart speller. She knows how to do it. And the teacher actually wrote a note that said she needs to be studying, like underline, exclamation point. And I thought, oh, no, you don't. She did study. It's not my fault. And I really felt as though she felt like I was being a bad parent. So I kind of stepped in. I requested a teacher meeting. We met. She said, I would encourage you to request testing, because that's sporadic. That's not normal. And so we requested testing, and it took from the beginning of the school year through May. And I almost felt, it's a great school, but I almost felt like it was political. I almost felt like they didn't want to give up their dollars on testing my child, because she wasn't bad enough yet. She wasn't failing enough yet. And it took me getting in touch with a school board member that I know and saying, I've got this problem, I need you to help. And until the school board member called the principal, they didn't do the testing. But what you taught me was the testing that they do isn't going to detect ADD or ADHD anyways. What is the testing that the school would do for a child?
The school would do the testing for learning disabilities. So if you're suspecting that there's some kind of an underlying learning disability, which is different than ADHD, I do evaluations for learning disabilities as well, but that's all the school will do, is a battery of tests to determine if there's some kind of a learning disability. So a lot of children don't have an underlying learning disability, and all they really have is an attention issue, and it could be mild or moderate or severe. So they would have to go to an outside professional to be evaluated for the attention issue.
Okay, and that's basically where we're at right now, because they really said if you send her on her happy way, if then she'll just keep doing what she's doing, and some days she'll get A's, some days she'll get D's, some days she'll get C's, and it'll just be this sporadic thing. But what we've learned is through that testing that the school did, for starters, she has a very high auditory processing, which means what she hears, she recalls and she can remember. So now if I can get the testing done with you, you can get the proper documentation to say, hey, this is the attention issue she has. If she can do her testing in a little room all by herself and she can actually read it out loud, now she's gone from a sporadic A, C, D, F, student to an A student because we've given her the learning environment that she excels at. And so I think that that's what's important with what you do. Now, if you have any advice for a parent that's watching here today, what do you find is one of the biggest mistakes that parents make when working with children that need this help, that need your help?
Yeah. I would say waiting too long, hoping that, they'll grow out of it, or blaming the child, thinking that they're just being lazy or unmotivated, blaming the teacher, blaming the school. Get as much information as you can about the child in terms of a comprehensive evaluation, so that you can have realistic expectations of what you can expect from your child. And we all have strengths and weaknesses, so it's important to identify what those are and build on those strengths and do what we can to support, any areas of weakness that we find. But, it's okay to acknowledge that, my child needs help.
Right.
And, not to worry about what other people think or say, and just do what you can to get as much information as you can so that you can put a plan in place to help them.
Now, I know that often as children grow older, as they graduate from college and start a job and all of that, they either put themselves in the area of strength that they are, like they find a career that focuses on their strengths so they can continue to excel. But if you have an adult that's watching the show that says, man, my mom never took me to get diagnosed, but I really think I may be ADD or I may be ADHD, is there anything they can do about it now, or do you say, you know what, you're 50, just deal with it?
No, I do evaluations on adults, and that's the conversation I have with them quite frequently, actually, is I've always suspected it, or, depending on how old they are, if they're in their 40s, well, it wasn't really diagnosed all that much back when I was a kid. Or my parents thought I had that, but wouldn't give me medication to help me. And I really resent them for that because school was much harder for me than it needed to be. And
so is there a way that they can get help now? Like, are there things, if they're in business and they have ADHD and they're 40 years old and they're in business and they're working every day, what are some of the things that could be affecting them? Like, is it just not being able to focus on a list of things to do, or not being able to complete a task? Like, what are some of the signs that may be red flags that they may want to look into?
Having a lot of difficulty multitasking. I think we all do multitasking today because that's the way that, the world is.
Right.
But, losing things, forgetting things, having, poor organization, being late and forgetful is a big thing that you see. Oftentimes when I evaluate a child, I'll see the parent and kind of know where it comes from because there's a strong genetic component there. So that's always interesting. But, decreased productivity. A lot of times they feel tired. And
is that just because they're like all over the place that it's mentally exhausting to them?
Yes, and then feeling frustrated because they're not getting what they need to get done at the end of the day, because they're so easily distracted by things. It can affect marriages. It can affect family life, as well as jobs. So more and more adults are identifying that in themselves after they've had their child evaluated. They're seeing a lot of those same characteristics in themselves and going and getting medication.
Okay, well, that is awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today. It's a
Thank
pleasure
you.
having you here.
Thank you.
And I know that you can
enjoyed it.
connect with Terry on the Woamtec page as well as the Woamtec Facebook page. So we will continue to share your information with everybody in Woamtec. And if you have any questions for Terry, please reach out to her via Woamtec. It's Terry Mattingly. And again, she is in the Heathrow chapter of Woamtec. So visit woamtec.com and look up her name. Do a search by Terry, Terry, and you can connect with her today. And she can direct you. If you're not in Florida, with somebody throughout the United States, probably you might be able to tell them what to look for at the very least as to how to find a psychologist to work with. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you.